I'm a professional tour guide from Moscow. I hope you can hear me. You can see the picture. If yes, please let me know. It's dark in Moscow. So, but I mean, this tour won't be about beautiful buildings. So, it's more about dark stories of criminal Moscow. Hello, Adrian. I hope everyone else can hear me. If yes, please let me know. So we will be able to start the tour. We have 1 minute before the tour starts officially. I hope, let me just check. Yeah, I think I did my best in terms of the sound. Hello, Tish. Hello, Heather, Sam, everyone else. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. It's coming soon. It's coming soon. So these days I've been doing many holiday special tours, and I know I'm not the only one. But if some of you are not into festive mood, festive atmosphere, you just want to hear some dark stories, this tour will be perfect for you. Hello, Graziella. Always happy to see you on my tours. Heather, thank you very much for your contribution. Highly appreciated. Always happy, especially in the beginning of the tours. Thank you very much for your support. So local time. Oh, thank you very much, Tish. Yeah, the local time is 6:30 p.m. And I think we are ready to start. Let me introduce myself. That's what I usually do in the beginning of the tour, in case you haven't joined my tours before. And also, I'm going to tell you about the tour. What are we going to explore today? So welcome again. My name is Tanya. I'm a professional tour guide from Moscow. I've been working as a tour guide for nearly 7 years, and I do all types of tours. I show the highlights of the city, the most beautiful places, and I have tours like the best of Moscow, the highlights of Moscow, part 1, part 2. I have several tours related to Red Square, Soviet times, British Moscow, and more. I also have tours where I explore some hidden gems, some hidden places with my tourists. And on my tours, I talk about Russian history, Russian culture, Russian architecture, Russian mentality, and more. This tour is pretty unusual for me because I'm more about showing beautiful design, beautiful architecture, and that's what usually tourists want to see when they come to Moscow, right? You have 2-3 days, 4 days, maximum. That's the average. And of course you want to see something extremely beautiful, the most beautiful cathedrals, the most beautiful fortresses. It makes sense. Why would you go to slums? Why would you go to the area that was one of the most dangerous districts in the city? So normally this tour is popular among Russian tourists, and I keep doing these tours for Russians. But since many of you have a lot of knowledge about Russian culture, and I've seen it in the chat, I know that many of you have joined my tours before, and I've also noticed that many voyagers are interested in that kind of like dark past of various countries. So that's why I came up with this idea to show you one of the most dangerous districts in our city. It's called, I'm sorry, I just need to do something with my scarf. Uh, and yeah, that the district is called Khitrovka, and it's written in the title of the tour. Basically, it's just Khitrovka Square, although the whole area is known as Khitrovka. If you want to see the name in Russian and in English, it shows us 2 minutes walk, maybe less. That's just, it shows for me, it's usually less. Is that a new hat? No, it's actually not my new hat. Of course, I need to answer a very popular question before it's even asked. What's the temperature? It's pretty cold. I mean, as you can imagine, it's evening, so it's approximately -5, -6 or 7. So I'll do my best. You see, I have special gloves, so we'll be able to share pictures with you. I will be able to scroll on my laptop. And yeah, I think we are ready to start. So before we will go to Khitrovka Square, I just wanted to show you One of the most interesting buildings that I actually haven't shown on some other tours. There are similar ones, but we, of course, this is, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm Russian, so I'm not used to say Celsius or anything. Take a look. It is, well, because of it's dark, it may not seem that clear, but I plan to do a tour around that skyscraper. It's one of the Seven Sisters, Stalin, so-called Seven Sisters, one of the Stalin skyscrapers. Very beautiful building. It was inspired by American skyscrapers, and the building became one of the main symbols of the city. So I just wanted to show you because it's nearby, and hopefully I will do a tour in there. We have again 7. That one that I've just showed you is just a residential building, believe it or not, but some people were lucky. Well, mainly like famous, rich and famous. And there's another beautiful building from Stalin's era. The architect was Ilya Golosov, also one of the best architects of the time. And we're getting inside not just to talk about Soviet architecture, but that is the beginning of our story for today. Even though many people know the name Khitrovka Square, that's what I showed you before, or they would know about the market, Khitrov market, but most of the people wouldn't know why it's called Khitrovka. So it's very easy. It's named after the order. So long story short, the area was abandoned for several years after a big fire in 1812. In 1812, we had the war with Napoleon. For pretty much like 75% of Moscow was burned down. Can you imagine? Like at that time, we had many wooden buildings, so it makes sense. Therefore, I mean, the area wouldn't attract many rich people to come here. And then one General Khitrovo decided to have an estate in here. So that is the one that I'm showing you, this beautiful classical design. Often we don't even visit it. It kind of contrasts with everything else that I'm going to show you. Of course, the area is not that scary as it used to be in the 19th century, but still. So here we go. That was one of the estates in the area. Oh, thank you very much, Lior. Thank you for appreciating it. Yeah, I think the beauty of Hego is that you can see the world from different angles, and sometimes, I mean, it's not obvious that conditions might be different. Oh, let's take a look at, and it's more than cold. It's really slippery. And I can be honest with you, I have high heels, not because, well, it's not easy to show. It's not easy to show. Well, I have high heels. And it's not because I wear high heels. Actually, I don't. But these were the warmest shoes that I had. And just because, I'll just restart my gimbal. And just because I have another tour in this area with Russians, so it basically like 4 hours or more for me walking around in this kind of weather, I've decided to do it. Actually, we don't have that kind of Christmas trees in the city, so I've just decided to show you because it's lovely. It's kind of simple. It reminds me of, my childhood or like Soviet movies. And I guess they have it in here just because it's hidden, maybe for people who live in the area. There's a red star at the top, which was very common for Christmas trees, and red star is one of the main elements of the Soviet design. Basically, it's for many, this is one of the main representations of Soviet power. It was the symbol of the Red Army, later on Soviet Army. So it was widely used in the design, including, architecture, including the metro, and also the Kremlin stars. So knowing about Khitrovo and the name behind this square, we are going to that infamous square called Khitrovka. Again, the area is not that big, so there is not much, to kind of like see and to show around, but it's still very meaningful. At that time in the 19th century, and I'm talking mainly about the second half of the 19th century, we had several areas, several so-called dangerous areas. Nevertheless, Khitrovka became the number one, the most popular one, the most famous one, especially among tourists these days. And there is an explanation. So I'm going to send you a picture in the chat. I hope this will be a good inspiration for some of you to learn more about Moscow. This is one of the most famous books about and popular books about Moscow, written by Vladimir Gilerovsky. Vladimir Gilerovsky, he was a historian. He wrote about Moscow. Yeah, thank you very much for everyone who's writing. Be careful. So at some moments, you'll be able to see that I'm showing you some weird shots. Don't worry, it's just me like trying to find the best way. So the square is already there. It's already in front of us. To break something. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, it is really important to stay safe and to stay healthy. Is this area known as Lenin's Hills? Oh no, Michael, absolutely not. Well, again, Michael, I'm really impressed with your knowledge. Lenin's Hills, they no longer exist, actually. It's the same as Sparrow Hills. Sparrow Hills used to be a village. Now it's one of the main observation decks in the city. So it's very different. Sparrow Hills never ever considered as something like dangerous. That is actually where I studied. So during this tour, I'm going to show you my alma mater. My university is just a building of my faculty. So we don't have campuses. And yeah, the area, that is pretty much everything that we have around us. So we know about it thanks to Gilerovsky, thanks to him. It became a really popular because he had this special style. He was more than just, writer. He was pretty much more even as a tour guide because he was showing around this area to some other famous Russians. For instance, to Stanislavski and Nemirovich Danchenko when they were preparing the play called The Low Depths. So I'm just going to send you some pictures. As you can see, it is pretty much about the bottom of the society, and that's certainly what it was. It's just because Gilerovsky himself was very charismatic. I'm going to send a picture of him. He actually looks more like a typical Ukrainian man than Russian. So it is quite interesting that he became one of the main tour guides of Moscow, the 19th century Moscow. See some comments in the chat. Okay. So I hope I didn't miss anything. Just a second. Okay. If you're new, well, welcome Tracy, welcome to Moscow again. This is not the most postcardable tour, not the most picturesque. It's more like about dark and twisted history, but I hope you will enjoy it. And so, hey, go is fabulous. Okay, thank you very much. So there are no questions for me. So let's talk about the story and let's talk about this kind of like dark and criminal areas. How did we end up with this criminal area? The story goes to the serfdom in Russia. Serfdom was considered as a Russian kind of type of slavery. We had peasants who had no rights, they had no land, and it was still 1861. During the time of Alexander II, who became known as liberator, they got their rights, they got opportunities to work, but at the same time, they didn't have any education, they didn't have land. So what would they do? So of course they needed a job, and at that time, pretty much most of them were living in villages. There was no job, so they had to go to big cities. And Moscow at that time wasn't the capital, but it was a former capital. So of course it was one of the biggest cities. And the reason why they were coming to this area in particular, because that's where we had the so-called job market. I'm going to send you a picture of how it used to look like. It was Khitrovka market. So imagine people coming here from all over Russia trying to get a job, and then they don't. Many thousands of them were not able to get a job, so that's how they ended up here in this area. They couldn't come back either because they didn't have money or for some other reasons, just because there was nothing else, and they still hoped that there would be more things to do in Moscow. And these areas that we can see, all what is called Khitrovka is basically more about, like, again, this square. I'm just going to show you some other buildings in around. Well, I know about Natalie, so she was certainly my inspiration. Honestly, I'm not very active as a voyager because I'm not able to pay for tours from Russia. It's my current blog, but I know she's the queen of heyday. And if you're new with heyday, I believe that Natalie is certainly one of the best tour guides to travel with. So look around. How we know that these buildings are from the 18th and the 19th century, 2 3-story buildings. And there's a similar story that I have on one of my tours called Red Light District. That was also one of the darkest areas in Moscow. And there I clearly say, but when you have 2 3-story buildings, you realize that's where you had either taverns or brothels. So here pretty much every building had its history. And they had iconic names like the Hell, hard labor, so they would easily tell you about its past. Let's take a look at one of the most famous ones and one of the oldest residential buildings. It's right in front of us, and it's called Yaroshenko House. So they would have a tavern in there, but mainly it would be used as slums, so people would be able to rent an apartment. And of course, Moscow wasn't the cheapest city, wasn't the cheapest areas, so this it wasn't affordable for many people, and this area ended up being the cheapest one. Although still there would be like 40 people just, kind of like in one room, so you can imagine how bad it was. And I just want to share with you during this tour some quotes from Gilerovsky, who I've already mentioned today, and I've sent his book. A green site was Khitrovka in the last century. Well, it's the 19th century. There was no light in the maze of corridors and passages on the crooked stairs leading to the bunkhouses on all floors. He will find his own way, and there is no need for a stranger to meddle here. And indeed, no power find his own dared to poke its head into these gloomy abysses. 2 and 3-story houses around the square are all full of such doss houses in which up to 10,000 people spend the night and huddled. These houses brought huge profits to homeowners. So imagine in the small area that we are seeing now, the maximum number of people at some point was 10,000 people were able just to settle here. And as I said, these were the low depths. People who were poor, extremely poor, they were, and in order to survive in all of this madness, of course, they had to drink a lot, they were drinking a lot, and all other attributes of this life were happening in here. You know what is impressive, like looking at this area, that we are pretty close to the city center. We are pretty close to one of the main areas of Moscow, one of the most beautiful areas of the city. And now we'll go inside this place. I'll be quiet because it's still a residential area. And actually, to get inside, you need to know a code. This area is not really something that is available for many Russians. That's why it's also popular. Look how dangerous it is. Yeah, so that's why this area is really popular among films. And one of the most famous Russian films called Brother was shot in here. And I think I need to use my flashlight. Yeah, I have it here. So I'm going to show you a picture from the movie. That movie is from the 90s by the director Alexei Balabanov, and it really well depicts the situation there with, mafia being chaotic. So again, we are in the city center. We are pretty much like 25 minutes walk to Red Square, the heart of Moscow. And, even like 5 minutes walk, and then you're in this luxury area where you have all these shops and everything. And then you see this. It is kind of unbelievable. It just completely different life. And I often say that Moscow is a city of contrasts. So look at this. Look at the stairs, like they're wooden. It is just unbelievable. It's also really calm and peaceful for the city center. So that's why many Russians like coming here. I just feel like more as a small Russian town, pretty much like a village where I would spend my childhood. Just to look at the door, and then all the other areas. I'm using my flashlight just to show you because it's really dark now. So of course, not the easiest time to do this tour. Although again, if you do it in the morning, it kind of creates a different atmosphere. But I think in somewhere we will be able to do some other tours like this one. We will be able to have more, so it will be a different atmosphere. So yeah, I mean, people live in here, and often I'm asked also by Russians, are they rich or not? But look at the cars. Like, my answer is, of course, I don't know them. I'm not friends with them. So I just like look at the cars. Some of them clearly tell you that these people are not poor, but at the same time, looking at some other windows, I will not go closer. It just seems like people are really poor. And here is the thing. I mean, yeah, Mercedes, BMW, and people still live there. That's so sad with the condition. Well, there are just so many things to take into account. Okay, let's go through. I hope nothing will fail. It's actually dangerous to walk around just because, well, this kind of piece can just easily fall down. But I want to show you something special and something really unique for Moscow. This is the oldest residential house that we have. Like, all the others were pretty much more like estates that I've showed you in the beginning of the tour. So it would be mainly for rich people. Others would just live in like small wooden houses, and then just to have this kind of sort of big one doesn't help. So the situation is that after the revolution in 1917, everything was nationalized. So in Soviet times, you couldn't have your own apartment, your own flat. So everything belonged to the government, even if you had. But then you still kind of received it from the government. And then after the 90s, the situation was really chaotic. So you either get it from your relatives, and then just some people who received it from their relatives, they wouldn't want to give it back. And in Soviet times, there were dormitories in here, so there would be different types of people. Now it's not only people living in here, but also some offices. So here's just one of them. Actually, it's very uncommon to have this. I mean, icons, it's more like paintings in Russia. We don't have statues in our churches. Well, in some we have, but it's very unusual. So I haven't seen this kind of works anywhere else except for this place. I don't know why they're outside. I just guess that there is an office or that there is no sign or anything. But from what I assume, there is a company. But the thing is, you cannot just easily come inside. I'm going to show you later. There is a code. So basically, there are no outsiders, only me, because I'm a tour guide. So I know the code. But there are sometimes groups come in with tour guide, and of course, people don't like it. They're disturbed, so they keep changing the code. So it makes your work job a little bit difficult for a tour guide. Yeah. That's what I said. Like there's an artist. I believe that there's just an office. So, because clearly, not all of them are apartments. There are many offices now, but some actually from here you can see that it's a very poor one. Like people having the clothes probably too heavy to steal. No, I don't think it's only about that. But again, it's also because, well, you see nobody inside. Like you cannot just easily enter. When we will go outside, well, as a tour guide, you kind of know the code thanks to your colleagues, and then you just know someone. And normally you have to pay money to people who live in here. So that's how you are able to do tours. Because I mean, in some countries and in some places in Russia, in St. Petersburg, it's more common, to do tours in residential areas because there are so many beautiful revenue houses, revenue mansions, and they are showing corridors. But again, it's oh my god, let me just be careful. But it's illegal because it belongs, to people. They live in there and they are not happy with it. So you kind of like you either do it official, or but with some other cars, like it's also interesting. Look at this one. This is one of the cheapest cars, and this is a Soviet car. It was legendary. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's so about like contrast in the city. Podkapaevsky Pereulok and the church. Who owns these buildings now? Private owners. I mean, it's not the government. So basically, when after the collapse of the Soviet Union, people were able to privatize apartments that they had where they were living. It was more difficult with the companies and everything, but that is just the story. So let me just see if I missed what are the items. So I didn't miss anything except for sending you a picture. Remember the door? So that was the door that I showed you from the movie called Brother. The movie was really symbolic, and it just showed you kind of like Russian hero, Russian character, but again more like someone who is fighting with mafia and everything. So it wasn't the only movie; it's just the one that is even known abroad. It was on Netflix. I think now they don't have. And looking at that window, I'm not going to show you the person closer, but it really. And you know why? Also, to tell you why some people are actually poor. I mean, you can imagine the building is from the 19th century. In the 19th century, in this kind of building, being so poor, they wouldn't have, some essential needs. They wouldn't provide even some essential needs. So, and knowing, I mean, all of this history, all of the things that this area has seen, even though it's close to the city center, I can assure you that it's far from being a comfortable residential area. And I want to share with you another passage from Gilirovsky describing this area and describing the infamous tavern that was in here called Hard Labor, or katorga in Russian. It was a den of violent and drunken people, an exchange of thieves and fugitives. The vendors from the dirt didn't let the light, and only one vendor, or the Shen boy with the white curtain, was lighter than the others. Whoever needs to approach the window, knock. The porthole opens. A hand sticks out from behind a curtain, palm up. The visitor silently puts a 50 kopeek, it's like 50 cents, piece in his hand. The hand disappears and reappears in a minute later with a bottle of vodka. Door slams shut. one thing, no words. So they had kind of like, the customs and the oven traditions. So then you wouldn't know. So I'm just going to show you. You see, there is a door with a lock and everything. So now I will get out and I'm going to show you how it works. So now it's just difficult to close it because of the cold, but here's the lock. So like you have to know it, and they keep changing it all the time. Why is he wearing Nazi decorations? I don't know. I haven't noticed any Nazi decorations, and it's also forbidden in here to compare anything to Nazis. In Russia, there's also a law, as you can imagine. Now I'm going to show you one of the oldest graffitis. It is also from the 60s or the 19th century. May not be that clear. And actually, the first time when I've started doing these tours, here we go. When I've started doing these tours, they didn't have one. But then there was more and more interest to this area. So then they even covered it in glass. The man, he reminds of, Russian writer of the 19th century, like Pushkin or Gogol. In that photo from the movie, one of the boys has a similar. Well, Michael, for that matter, rewatched the movie, but I think it was about neo-Nazis, like showing neo-Nazis, because we also had them in Russia, especially in the 90s. It was actually one of the reasons why my aunt, is Jewish, moved to Israel. So they were just really scared at that time. It was a crazy time. I mean, I believe you've heard about Nazis and everything that was just happening. So yeah, I guess, honestly, I watched this movie. I watched it when I think I was like 13 or 14. It was around the time when it was released. I tried to rewatch it again. I liked it. I really liked it, and I remember many things about it. There are two parts. But it's a little bit difficult for me because I'm getting very emotional about like Russia and its past, but hopefully one day. So this is a new thing. What do you think it is? It's just kind of like modern design, modern sculpture. It's called circles in the cube. So here you go. So let's take a look at some other buildings in this square. The one in front of us, it's called the Iron Building. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the tour, in one of the quotes, that they were passages. They were basically passages, corridors in there, and it's believed that they still exist in there. So when I started doing this tour, so when I studied, because actually I studied in the building that is right in Khitrovka Square, it's that one. We'll get closer. I'm going to show you my door. There was no information, and all of us didn't actually know about it. James, thank you very much for sharing it with us. It certainly gives some kind of like insight in Dostoevsky. Although Dostoevsky, it's more about like St. Petersburg, and there are many tours about Dostoevsky, St. Petersburg. It's even worse, I would say, like the things that were used to be in this area. I'm going to send you more photos so you will see. If you've heard about Maxim Gorky, I mentioned him on many tours, and one of his plays is called Low Depths. And often people compare this area, Khitrovka, to Low Depths. And I'm going to send you the cover of the book. So many would say that he was writing about this area, but actually it's not true. He was writing about another area which was similar to this one, called Milyonka in Nizhny Novgorod. Nizhny Novgorod, it's just a town in Russia that's where Gorky lived. There's even an element. Oh, thank you very much. Well, I like it. So a few years ago, there was a big debate about this square. So I'm just going to show you some construction works. At some point, they wanted to have a mall. Of course, everyone wants to have a mall in the city center or something like a hotel. You'll make more money. But interestingly, that people living in this area opposed it because they were like, no, we want to have a park, we want to have our square, and it's meaningful. And many tour guides, or Urmanists were opposing it because it's history. And often, hotel owners don't really think about it. Like, they don't think about the past. And luckily for us, a few years ago, again, when I started during this tour, we didn't really have it. They've got so much information about the area. Of course, it's all in Russian. So here again, like, you just see that it's a very small area. So we are here. That's just the square. And then we have all the buildings around it, so many historical signs. Yeah, and I have to tell you that many Russians love squares. So there's information about it in the 16th, 17th century. There's a picture of Khitrovka. So the square is named after him, although he has nothing to do with it. He died even before it became that dirty, dark, dirty area. So let me send you some of the real pictures from the past, from the 19th century, to show you these people. And they were men, children, and in winter, Gilerovsky was writing that in winter, children were barefoot. That's just because how poor they were. I can't imagine, to be honest, walking around now, and winters can be even colder in Russia. So that was just absolutely insane. So the second picture was taken by Andrew Murray. He was an American photographer who took this picture in 1909, and he even received an award for it. But what was interesting, that it was dangerous to come to this area. Even the police was scared. So his description of the event was that the crowd robbed him and he had to resort to the help of a policeman. So honestly, I question like how he was able to receive the photo if they robbed him, but I assume that he just gave them some money. So that's the way it was. And so we are able to see this. So that's why, the square existed, and it was getting like bigger and bigger because the police couldn't do anything. And especially imagine the time of the revolution. So we had civil wars in the beginning of the 20th century. So there was the war with Japan, then the World War One, Russian Revolution, Civil War, just so much. And then new Soviets, Bolsheviks come into power. So, of course, they had a lot of things to change, to deal with. And they ended up shutting it down in the late 20s, in around 1928. So we are going to see some more two revolutions. It's true. Several revolutions. There was also a revolution in 1905. So that's just October and February revolution. Did these people from part of a revolutionary movement? We don't know. By the way, how can we know about these people if everyone was scared to come here? Most of the things that we know, again, thanks to Gilerovsky, that I sent you a book, and also thanks to, like some other writers, maybe to some police reports, but mainly it would be based because Gilerovsky, for some reason, he wasn't scared. It seemed amusing to him. For others, like, you really need to make a research. And in Soviet times, it wasn't the same as prostitution. It wasn't the topic that we would openly talk about. And now we are going to take a look at some maison de tolérance, meaning brothels. So before we will go there, I'm going to show you my alma mater. I haven't been here for like 10 years. So High School of Economics, one of the best universities in Moscow. Oh, now it's Faculty of Creative Industries. At my time, it was the Faculty of Journalism, actually political and economical journalism. So that's why I'm always into like politics, these kind of topics, all there at the same time. I'm trying to avoid it, but you see my past. And I can tell you that when we were studying in here, we knew nothing about this Khitrovka. It's not like this criminal area. We kind of have heard about it. It's not something that every Muscovite would know about. It's just something that you really need to research, and mainly that's why these kind of tours are very popular. So this is one of the most popular tours among Russians. And here, because normally, if as a Russian you don't go on tours such as like, Red Square, meaning like Tour Eiffel for French, because you feel like, oh my God, I know it, I've seen it. You just want to see something more, and showing these backyards to them, it is unbelievable. Were there any charities to help them? No. I mean, there were some philanthropes at the time, but philanthropes were mainly supporting. They were mainly supporting like hospitals. They were building hospitals. It wasn't as big as today, and especially when you have people who can be dangerous. Like, and many of them were actually criminal. How would they survive? How would they make money? Since it was close to the city center, it was actually even close to the areas where rich people used to live. So they would just rob everyone. That was also the reference that we had depicted in the picture. So, helping people who have lost any moral standards. And that was also the case. It's a big question, like speaking of but at that time, it wasn't, let's say, on that point. Thank you very much, Michael. What was your school part of? No, it wasn't my school. So the story with my school, it was professors. They were professors at Moscow State University, but then they've decided to establish the own university. It was actually 30 years ago in 1992. And then later on, it became the #1 university. Like now, it's often compared to MGU, Moscow State University, but it's often, I consider it as the best, and it's probably the only liberal university, and the only like university of this, kind of like liberal values. So let's take a look at these rooms. You see these kind of like corridors and these rooms. So the story says that here we had this maison de tolérance. It derives from French tolerance. Yeah, the house of tolerance. It's a lovely way to name brothel. Well, as many French names. So as you can see, every lady had her own door, and of course there were many prostitutes. Very, very cheap prostitutes. Also, like I have a tour about prostitution in brothels, red light district, and often when I show a picture of prostitutes, everyone was like, seriously, because they let's say they don't really look appealing, and this is the only picture that I found because again it wasn't easy to take pictures in here. So yeah, that's how we can imagine. I much prefer realistic tourists. Me and Michael. Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy, but unfortunately, I mean, the number of participants is quite low. So I really appreciate you spending your time with me. And if you enjoy this story, you can write a review. So hopefully more participants will be able to join me next time. And maybe we will be able to explore more during summer when it won't be so cold. Although I believe it's also amusing to see me struggling through snow. Look at this building. Again, this is just something unbelievable for the city center of Moscow, to see this kind of like calm areas. Looks very lovely in summer, but I just want to show you that they still have this kind of like door and charming atmosphere. James Michel, I hope Michel, thank you very much for your contributions. It's actually already the end of the tour, so thank you very much for your contributions. As I believe all of you know, it's a tip supported tour. Let's take a look. Yeah, the reason why it's so slippery, it's kind of like icy, just because one day it's raining, sort of raining. One day it's +1, next day it's -8, as today. So that's why we have not the easiest weather conditions. So yeah, it's most of you know, it's tip supported tours, and that's how we are able to organize these tours for you and to show you more and more, and to create new tours, to invite our colleagues to do more tours for you, to explore new places. As you know, we don't have any salary or anything, so basically that is the way the platform is able to operate. So thank you very much for your support. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. I'll see. Yeah, there is one story that I want to share with you at the end. Well, I see that some people have left, but I hope you will enjoy the story, and I'll also go through my pictures to show you something also interesting. Just one of the examples, one of the stories, I think one of the most impressive stories from this area, and then we will go to this very different area, more like hipster area, which is also hidden. Many Russians don't know about it, so I hope you will enjoy it. Meanwhile, I mean, oh my god, I accidentally left the tour, sorry.